Okay, part 3. I'll do one of these, and then I'll start doing the reactions, I hope. Okay, practical. Divine protection of the gods. Oh, it's going to be interesting. The aim of my afternoon practical was to obtain the divine protections of the gods. Doing this for the elemental aptitudes that one was born with made using spells of those elements that much easier. It was a very important class that was held right after the third year separated into their specialty courses. We were going to be performing the practical one by one at the shrine to the gods located at the back of the Royal Academy's auditorium. Those of us who had passed the theology exam, which had required us to memorize the names of all the gods, were gathered together no matter our status. Everyone from Ehrenfest had passed, so every single one of our third years was here. This is going to be our first practical together, Lady Rosemine, Felina said, a smile playing on her lips as we made our way to the auditorium. She was right. Every other practical up to this point had required us to be separated according to status. It sure is cute seeing her so excited. As I was enjoying the peaceful atmosphere, Feline rummaged through her things and then pulled out her diptych. Hartman instructed me to record what divine protections you obtain here. Feline and I will be splitting the workload so that you can get protection from as many subordinates as you want, Broderick proudly added as he took out his own diptych. Hartman, you huge dummy! Why would you tell them to do that? There's no need for that, I replied. I shall scold Hartman at a later date for wasting your time with such trifling requests. It was hard to say what he was hoping for, but I was the only person who needed to know what protections I obtained. It wasn't something for my retainers to be writing down. The auditorium was filled with those taking this afternoon lesson. A single glance showed that most were wearing either Jerwonkel's emerald green capes or our own dark yellow ones. It was students of other colors being countable on a single hand. In total, our class numbered in the low 20s. Memorizing the names of all the gods evidently wasn't quite so easy. As we approached the Ehrenfest group, I noticed that Wilfred and Ortwin were in mid-conversation. What was all that about your duchy struggling to pass because so many of your students were sick, the latter asked. My bad, Wilfred replied. Seems I tricked you without meaning to. But trust me, we were dealing with circumstances beyond our control. From this point on, Ehrenfest is going all out. It was an excellent way of combining an apology with a taunt. I decided to cheer Wilfried on in silence, not wanting to intrude upon this friendship between bros. As I gazed around the auditorium, I noticed the blue-caped Hannelore standing all alone. It seemed that she was the only Dunkelfelger in third year to have passed on the first day. I would expect nothing less from my fellow bookworm. Lady Hannelore, how do you do? I called, approaching her with a smile. She turned to me and smiled as well. How do you do, Lady Rosemine? I see that everyone from Ehrenfest is here. How truly wonderful. I struggled so much trying to memorize the names of all the gods. As did I. Oh, really? Hannelore asked, blinking in surprise. I was assigned to be High Bishop at the same time as my baptism, so I was given almost no time to learn the names of the gods using the temple's rituals. Even now, I remember my despair as I pored over the Bible. It was only because of that experience that I found our class this morning rather easy. To think you were made the High Bishop so soon, Hannelore sighed, her expression clouding over as though to say, I can't believe they would put you in such a place. It seemed that temples had a poor reputation even in Dunkelfelger. Wait, is this going to add to the rumor that Sylvester is a cruel ob? I should probably clarify, and it makes sense to start with those I can speak to directly. I do not know how the temple is viewed in other duchies, but it is a pleasant and comfortable place in Ehrenfest, I said. The ob visits it personally, and although Wilfrid and Charlotte do not have official positions there, they assist with the rituals. Ferdinand was even reluctant to leave it when his engagement to Ahrensbach was decided. The ob goes there and Lord Ferdinand was reluctant to leave? Truly? Hannelore asked, her eyes wandering to Feline and Roderick. She was clearly in disbelief, but I hadn't told a single lie. Sylvester had infiltrated the temple as a blue priest and even attended spring prayer, while Ferdinand had loved holding up in his workshop to do research. Feline nodded with a smile. Roderick and I began visiting the temple after becoming Lady Rosemine's retainers. It is spotlessly clean, and the food is delicious as well. Not to mention the attendants there are trained to the same level as the nobility. Now that Lord Ferdinand has gone to Ahrensbach, we have Hartman as our new high priest, Roderick added. He has been visiting the temple quite eagerly. It occurred to me then that I needed to give Clarissa a letter. It was my duty as Hartman's lady to explain the circumstances surrounding his entering the temple and taking on his current position. The purge really had pushed so many other things from my memory. And there seems to be noticeable differences between the temples and our duchies, I said. I will speak to Clarissa, who is engaged to Hartman, about the details at a later date. Oh, certainly I will inform her for you, Hannelore said, maintaining a smile but blinking rapidly. Something had apparently thrown her mind into complete chaos, so I said a swift farewell and went on my way. Well, hopefully that makes people reconsider those bad rumors about Sylvester, even if only a little. Now that I was on my own again, I told Feline and Roderick to go over the names of the gods. As one can only take this lesson after passing the theology exam, memorizing those names is more important than anything else, I said. I do not care about Hartman's request in the least. The two of you need to focus on yourselves. A noble's elemental aptitudes were determined at birth. One generally had the element of one's birth season, with the rest being influenced by the elements of one's parents, so siblings tended to have similar elements. One's mana quantity also depended on the size of one's vessel, which in turn depended on how much mana a pregnant mother channeled into her child. As a result, it wasn't uncommon for there to be disparities even among siblings. One's vessel grew along with one's body, and one's mana quantity depended on how much mana was compressed during one's growth period. The divine protections you obtain have a considerable impact on what spells and what amount of mana you can use, I said. If you two are bemoaning your lack of aptitudes, I will recommend that you start praying carefully so that you can obtain those sooner rather than later, okay? Wilfrid, having finished talking with Ortwin, came over with a quizzical expression. I know it said that acquiring divine protections and taking certain actions can give you more elements, but I've never heard of anyone in class getting divine protections from an element they didn't already have. This was news to me, but it wasn't very much of a surprise. I wasn't exactly the most informed when it came to Royal Academy affairs. Well, the textbooks say that one can improve their elements, so it must be true, I said, though I have heard of someone failing to obtain a divine protection despite having the necessary element. What? They had the aptitude but still couldn't get the divine protections? Wolfen exclaimed, shocked. I had never heard of that happening before. It wasn't something that warranted mentioning before, entirely because it had never came up in conversation, but Angelica hadn't been able to get one of her primary divine protections. It was such a rare occurrence that some people, Wilfrid included, until just a moment ago, were unaware it could even happen. In truth, it was Angelica, I said. Despite having an aptitude for wind, she failed to get divine protection for it. I'd understand her not getting a response from Mestinora, the goddess of wisdom, or Kutzel, the goddess of art, but I find it so strange she couldn't even get anything from Ordoshnelli, the goddess of couriers, or Styfbreeze, the goddess of the gale. Shudzaria was a symbol of protection and speed, associated in particular with the fast delivery of messages, so it was only natural that her subordinates were known for their swiftness. I thought that Angelica received protection from them all, what with her light nature and speed-focused fighting style, but that hadn't happened. Feline paled. What will I do if the gods of the one element I possess do not grant me their divine protection? She was going to be appealing to wind as well. There is nothing for you to worry about, said none other than Hersher, who was cackling to herself as she entered the room. What makes you so sure? Feline asked, still clearly anxious. Because I know precisely why Angelica failed to obtain the protection she sought. I, too, was forced to assist with her studies as her dormitory supervisor. It seemed the dormitory supervisors had to take responsibility for students who were unable to pass during the winter term and needed to attend remedial classes in spring. Hersher sighed and added that it had truly been a nightmare. Professor Hersher, please do tell me why Angelica failed to receive the divine protection of wind. It was because she proved unable to remember the names of the gods and could not give the required prayer. What? That doesn't make any sense. You need to have passed the test proving that you remember the names of all the gods before you can even take this class. What is Professor Hersher saying? She may have been a season later than most everyone else, but Angelica took this class right after passing the exam retake as a standard. She clearly experienced some kind of mental lapse, though I cannot be sure as to what actually happened. Perhaps she forgot all the names immediately after the test because she thought she no longer had need of them? Or perhaps she only vaguely remembered them to begin with? It could be that she expanded all of her energy remembering the prayer itself. Only the gods know, but in the end she failed to say the names upon the magic circle. She merely waited there with her head tilted to one side. Oh no! I could totally imagine Angelica getting into her oh dear pose atop the magic circle. I could also picture Hersher standing beside the magic circle with her head in her hands. Even when working together, those of us in the Raise Angelica's grade squadron had struggled to get Angelica to pass. I can only imagine how much Hersher had suffered on her own. So if one can't say the names of the gods correctly, they won't receive their protections, Wilfrid asked? The gods must not want to assist those who cannot even remember their names. It makes sense. Hersher replied, I cannot express how relieved I am that Angelica was able to graduate, even if only due to Lady Rosamund's influence as her lady. Hersher then moved to the front of the room. She and Gundolf, an old man who was both her research buddy and rival, were our professors for this class. Maybe they had been selected because most of our students here were from Ehrenfest and Drwonkel? Ah, not many people here today, Gundalf said. Everyone move up to the front. We all did as instructed and instinctively sat in order for our duchy's ranking. This made the unusual fact that everyone from Ehrenfest had passed even more apparent. Now, bring it here, Hersher said. A man dressed like a servant stepped forward with Hersher's magic tool, the same projector thing she had used for last year's class. She set it up, then turned around to face us all. Now then, I shall explain the ritual for receiving the divine protections of the gods. To summarize, one had to start by memorizing the prayer. Those who were quickest to memorize it would perform the ritual first. Only one person was going to be allowed to enter the farthest hall with the shrine at a time to prevent distractions, and everyone else could use the extra time to study for tomorrow's written lesson. Those who finished the ritual would be allowed to leave. This is the prayer, Hersher said, then used her magic tool to project the words onto some white cloth. I was nervous at first, but the tension quickly drained from my body when I saw the words that were written. It's basically the same prayer as always. I am one who offers prayers and gratitude to the gods who have created this world. O mighty king and queen of the endless skies, O mighty eternal five who rule the mortal realm, O goddess of water flute train, O god of fire Leidenschaft, O goddess of wind Shitzaria, O goddess of earth Geduld, O god of life Aviglabe, we honor you who have blessed all beings of life, and pray that we may be blessed further with your divine might. The main difference was that this prayer, unlike those for the dedication ritual and man of replenishment, also included the names of the subordinate gods. The speaker then had to conclude with the line, "Let me be granted the protection of those divinities who grace my prayers with their approval." That's surprisingly simple, I observed. Sure, it's just like the man of replenishment prayer, but can you really call it simple, Wilfred asked. You can't make a single mistake when repeating it. Now that he mentioned it, I noticed that everyone around us was mumbling to themselves as they attempted to memorize the prayer. To my surprise, even Ortwin and Hannelore were having hard expressions, despite them being from the archducal families of greater duchies and presumably used to helping with man of replenishment. Well, there was no reason for me to waste any more time. I stood up at once and said, Professor Hersher, I have memorized the prayer. All eyes fell on me, and Hersher gave an exasperated sigh. Lady Rosemont, is this not much too soon, she asked. I mean, I am the High Bishop. This is almost identical to the prayer I usually give at the temple, but with a few more words added on. Is that so? She asked. Everyone was now blinking in surprise. I nodded with a smile, hoping that my efforts would improve everyone's opinion of the temple. The prayer is also similar to the one given when performing mana replenishment on the foundational magic, so I would not consider it strange for an Archduke candidate to have memorized it so quickly. A prayer when performing mana replenishment, Ortwin said, as far as I'm aware, there's no such thing. Okay, that explains it. That explains why they don't know about it. Hannelore nodded in agreement. Wilfred exchanged a glance of me, then turned back to Ortwin. The awe of my sisters and I in Ehrenfest, we all pray while performing mana replenishment. Is that not the case in Drwonkel or Dunkelfelger? In Drwonkel, it's uncommon for us to perform mana replenishment at all, since we have so many adults in our archducal family. But when we do perform it, all we do is put our hands on and channel our mana into the magic circle. I've never used a prayer for it. Hersher clapped her hands together and said, Let us leave it at that, interrupting Wilfred and Ortwin's increasingly heated conversation. Perhaps the practice changed over the long years of your duchies. We can discuss the possible merits of researching this further after class. First, memorize the prayer. Nobody was talking about researching it, though. Hersher and Gundalf were both grinning. I had something of a bad feeling about this, but before I could dwell on the matter any further, Hersher gestured me over. Okay, Lady Rosemont, this way. Hersher took me to the shrine in the farthest hall through a door in the back of the auditorium, leaving Gundalf to oversee the other students. It was larger than the shrine and the temple's chapel, but the setup was the same. Statues of the gods and the same red carpet used for the dedication ritual. Offerings such as flowers and incense were also prepared, excluding the lack of chalices. It was basically identical to what I was used to. The biggest change was the large carpet embroidered with a magic circle of all the elements. Praying there would most likely send mana to the shrine. I just need to kneel in the center of the circle and pray, right? I asked. Indeed, you always save me the need to waste time with explanations. I stepped into the circle and faced the shrine as I would for the dedication ritual, then knelt down. I placed my hands on the circle and slowly began channeling mana into it. I am one who offers prayers and gratitude to the gods who have created the world. I went on to invoke the supreme gods and then the eternal five. Each name that passed my lips caused the circle to shine brighter and a beam of the respective element's color to shoot up from the appropriate symbol. Light for all the elements? Could it be? Hersher mumbled, shocked. The room was so quiet that I could very clearly hear what she was saying. I continued to channel mana into the circle while carefully listing the name of each subordinate god. By the time I was done, about half of the names had produced a reaction. Wait a minute. There's 12 subordinate gods for each god. There's eternal. Does that include the god of darkness, the god of darkness and goddess of light? If not, then there's 60 subordinate gods in total. Plus the eternal 5, that's 65. Then the king and queen, that's 67. Dang. Imagine getting them all. That would be insane. Half of the names had produced a reaction. Each one had made the lights shine brighter, and the elemental pillars grow taller. All that remained was the last line of the prayer. Let me be granted the protection of those divinities who grace my prayers with their approval. Light from the 7 elemental pillars shot up into the air above my head, flashing and spinning together in what looked to be a boisterous dance. A light then rained down upon me and flowed across the red carpet, each color being sucked into its respective statue. I gazed up in awe, taken aback by the divine beauty of the display. Then a low rumbling caught my attention. The statues began to spin as if performing a dedication whirl, all the while moving to either side of the shrine. What? Professor Herscher, what's going on? I asked, turning back to her. She was looking up at the shrine with an expression that made it hard to tell whether she was surprised. It's entirely like what happened during Ferdinand's ritual. I somewhat anticipated this, but to think it actually came to be. This happened with Ferdinand too? I asked. Indeed, he looked up with a curious expression and said something along the lines of, is this not one of the mysteries passed down in the Royal Academy? It was then that he began to investigate them all. Ferdinand and Herscher sure are tough to surprise, huh? It must take a lot of composure to think about research in the face of something so bizarre. Herscher pointed at the altar and said, they are almost finished. Indeed, it looked entirely as though the statues, after having twirled and twirled, had created a path for me. And now that the Supreme King and Queen had moved, there was a hole visible in the mosaic pattern wall. Go forth, Lady Rosamond. Where? To the distant heights, as per your invitation from the 2 supreme gods. What? Yeah, that kind of does sound like she just said, stake the stairway to the distant heights, as aka die. Her phrasing made it sound entirely as though I was heading to the afterlife. I wish she would be less ominous, but before I could say anything, if you do not hurry, the hole will not close, and you will inconvenience the next student. You may use your high beast, just be quick. Herscher was practically shooing me away, so I produced Leslie and went to the top of the staircase where the 2 supreme gods were waiting. I didn't have the stamina to reach the entrance myself. After reaching the top of the stairs, I climbed out of my panda bus. The supreme gods had originally been holding hands in what had appeared to be in a romantic gesture, but now they were apart. They were pointing to the way forward. Entering the square hole was very much like going into the Mana Replenishment Hall. I needed to pass through an iridescent film, similar in appearance to an oil slick, that was wavering in empty space. I couldn't tell what was beyond it, and like my first time entering the Mana Replenishment Hall, my whole body tensed up as I stepped through. Coming in, I called. The moment I passed through the iridescent barrier, my environment changed. I was suddenly standing on a circle of pure white stone, at the center of which was a giant white tree, seemingly made of the same material. Isn't that the tree where you got your divine will? Its trunk stretched up into the heavens. Its branches were splayed wide, and through its leaves streamed great gentle light. I remember this scenery. This was the white plaza where I obtained my divine will. I already had my staff, so there was anything new here. The big white tree was just as big and white as ever. Students used to get their staffs and divine protections at the same time. When graduating, maybe they found their staffs here incidentally after getting their protections? Maybe the intended way of things was for someone to spend their days studying and praying until they came of age and stopped growing, and only then would they receive their staff and protection? Though, well, that doesn't mean anything to me. I guess Ferdinand got his staff here when he was a 3rd year. I watched the White Plaza for a while, but nothing happened. I decided to return to the shrine to the iridescent film, feeling a little annoyed that had I come this way when getting to my divine will, then I wouldn't have ended up collapsing. That walk was super long, like seriously. I gazed down from the top of the shrine and saw both Herscher and the magic circle. I could copy out that magic circle. Would that give Angelica a second chance to perform the ritual, I wonder? Maybe? You better make a good mental note of that circle, girl. Perhaps I could even modify the prayer to help her get the divine protection of wind, making it so that she only needed to memorize the goddesses overseeing speed and whatever else she wanted? With that in mind, I took out my diptych and recorded the magic circle before descending the stairs. The opening closed as soon as I exited the circle, and the statues of the gods began returning to their original places. It was a slow but steady process. What a strange sight, I said. Does this not happen to everyone who does the ritual? I have only seen it happen with you and Ferdinand. You both truly are out of the ordinary, Hersher said, though she didn't look at all surprised. Now, Lady Rosemine. Ferdinand would not tell me what he found in there, but I trust that you will tell me everything. It seemed that only the person who performed the prayer could ascend the shrine, so after watching Ferdinand do the ritual, Hersher had only been able to wait and stew. To make matters worse for her, he had remained completely silent about what he had seen. Hersher was peering down at me, her purple eyes alive with excitement, but I returned a harsh stare. Do you think I would just go and tell you when Ferdinand determined it best not to? I said. I will consult with him first before doing anything else. Looks like it's time to put my disappearing ink to use. To think I'd need it on my very first day of class, though. Isn't that a bit much? Hersher looked at me, shook her head, and then muttered in disappointment. Ferdinand was always stubborn about the strangest things. Music and everyone's rituals. Lady Rosamond, which gods granted you their divine protection? Roderick asked when I returned to the auditorium, sounding excited. He was holding his diptych at the ready, but unfortunately for him, I wasn't quite sure if it was even big enough to write down all the names. Not wanting to draw any unnecessary attention to myself, I waved away both Roderick and Feline, who had come away from her studies to take out her diptych as well. Have you both memorized the prayer? Go perform your own ceremonies then. I haven't yet, Roderick replied. Then focus on that. I myself will study for tomorrow's written lessons. I couldn't leave until Riarda and my guard knights came to get me, so I returned to my studies while waiting for the others to finish. To be honest, I wanted to cast some spells. Receiving divine protections apparently made them require less mana, but I could hardly go about firing off magic while everyone else was working hard trying to memorize the prayer. I would break their focus at the very least. Memorized it, Wilfred announced. Guess it's my turn. Do you have any rejuvenation potions? I asked. Yeah. Wilfred was the second to attempt his ritual after me. As expected, he had memorized the text in no time at all, owing to his familiarity with the mana replenishment prayer. He went off with Hersher looking particularly tense. In the light of a second Ehrenfest student going to the farthest hall seemed to light a fire under those from the other duchies, who started working even more seriously than before. I did it, Rosemine, Wilfred exclaimed upon his return not much later, wearing a gleeful expression. He was approaching at a brisk walk, though. I could tell that he wanted to break into a sprint. I got the divine protection of 12 gods. Even Professor Hersher was surprised. Did he just say 12 gods? A female student whispered. That sure is a lot, Ortwin said. A stir ran through the gathered students. This news hadn't come as a surprise to me. Wilfred had 6 elements, and unlike Angelica, he hadn't been at risk of getting all the gods' names wrong, but a 12 was evidently enough for people to be taken aback. How about you, Rosemine? You must have gotten a lot of subordinates too, right? Yeah, I can hardly say that I got like 40. I'm just gonna keep quiet. Yeah, because if you mentioned this would go around the school like wildfire, and people would be nuts. There was no need for me to depress Wilfred when he was so excited, nor was there any need for me to make the students dramatically more shocked than they already were. Instead, I decided to take a page from Angelica's book. I placed a hand on my cheek and gave an angelic smile. I did indeed receive protection from several subordinate gods, but is such a thing truly so rare? I asked. It is even written in the textbooks and reference documents that one will obtain such protections according to their deeds. So was this not to be expected all along? The fact that we had both received so many made it seem nowhere near as rare as everyone was making out. Hannelore gave a troubled smile. It is normal to receive only one protection per element, Lady Rosemine. Apprentice knights and Dunkelfelger students may receive several from the fire subordinates, but of course Lord Wolfrey does not specialize in combat. I would consider him receiving so many protections to be both rare and rather wonderful. So, a lot of Dunkelfelger students receive divine protections from fighting-type subordinates. Yeah, that makes sense. In true Dunkelfelger fashion, even Clarissa, a scholar, was said to be a deadly fighter. Maybe Hannelore could get protection from several fighting types too? Is anyone else ready? Gundolf called. Ortwin paused for a moment and then said, I am. Hersher, let's switch. I should be the one to escort Ortwin. And so Ortwin made his way to the farthest hall with Gundolf, an unmistakable glint in his eye. The news that Wilfred and I had both received protections from several subordinates had made him especially confident, but he returned looking disappointed. He had only gotten one protection from each element he possessed. I only got one of each, Ortwin said. And he wasn't alone. Most others also entered the ritual with no more protections than they had elements. In other words, despite my initial suspicion, receiving more than one element was rare. Soon enough, Hannelore returned from her own ritual looking especially baffled. Did you not get the divine protections of any subordinate gods, Lady Hannelore? I asked. No, I did. I received them from Dragoner, the goddess of time, and Angrif, the god of war. That sounds wonderful, so why do you look so troubled? Hannelore glanced all around us, her 2 pink pigtails swishing from side to side as she anxiously looked at everyone watching her. I am glad, of course, but I simply do not understand why I obtained them. I do not know what I could have done to warrant their attention. She then exited the room, seeming truly confused. Lord Wolfred, Lady Rosamund, if you would excuse me, said an archnoble with a light blue cape, indicating that he was from Frembeltag. Once the archnoble was gone, only Ehrenfest students remained. Nobles and med-nobles, they had refrained from attempting the ritual sooner out of concern of overstepping the boundaries of their status. One by one, and in order of social rank, they made their way to the Father's Hall, and like the others, they returned to having obtained only as many protections as they had elements. This leaves just Roderick and Feline, I said. Go ahead, Roderick. I would rather go second so I can see what Feline gets. I will go first then, Feline said, standing up. She was gripping the rejuvenation potion hanging from her hip, with an expression full of worry. You will be fine as long as you put your heart into the prayer, I said. She nodded, and as we watched, she went to perform the ritual. It wasn't long before she returned, racing back to us with rosy cheeks and a look of scarcely contained joy. Lady Rosamund, I've received a new element, she exclaimed, her grass-green eyes sparkling with delight. Wind, Mestanor, the goddess of wisdom, granted me her divine protection. Praise be to the gods, she struck the prayer rose, indicating how much visiting the temple almost every day was influencing her. I smiled in response, but everyone else was staring at her in shock. What? cried good old Katinka. You got an element you didn't have an affinity for? How did you do it, Feline? Roderick asked, standing up from his chair with a clatter. I do not know how or why it happened. I just used a rejuvenation potion to completely fill the circle with mana, as Lady Rosamund instructed, and prayed. Our students weren't the only ones excited to hear Feline's unexpected report. Gundalf, our supervisor, leaned closer with bright eyes. I should very much like to hear the details, he said. Feline, was it? Are you a lay noble? I suppose you only had one affinity to begin with, then, correct? Tell me, what element was it? Feline could only blink at this sudden barrage of questions while Roderick looked on in frustration, wanting to ask his own questions before doing the ritual himself. Gundalf seemed to notice this, but he was too interested in the current situation to care. Instead, he pointed toward the farthest hall and said, You there, boy, go do your ritual already. Having no choice but to obey, Roderick started toward the farthest hall, though he continuously looked back to us as he went, as if wanting to ask something. Meanwhile, Gundalf returned to questioning Feline, all the while wearing the gentle smile of a kindly grandfather. So, your affinity, he asked? Earth. So you now have wind as well. Mestanor often focuses her attention on those who carry out intellectual work. Tell me, what manner of work have you been doing exactly? It seemed that while Drawanko was brimming with intellectual pursuits, few of his students actually received Mestanor's divine protection. Gundalf evidently wanted to change this, and ensure that more of the duchy students received protection from wind, in the same way that those from Dunkelfelger often receive protection from fire. Professor Gundalf, I said, I understand how you feel, but please limit your questioning to that. We will need to go back to our dormitory when Roderick returns. It feels as though he would continue all day otherwise. Feline gave a relieved sigh, then attempted to answer the many questions thrust upon her. In regard to intellectual pursuits, I suppose one could count the stories I've been gathering for Lady Rosamund. I may have been granted this protection as a result of studying as hard as I could to make modern translations. Or maybe it was because of my time spent helping Lord Ferdinand in the temple? Gundalf nodded along. After hearing Feline lay everything out like that, I came to realize just how hard she had been working. There are some in Drawanko who are gathering and writing stories for Lady Rosamund to purchase, and there are more studious ones among them as well, Gundalf mused aloud. Intellectual pursuits on that level were common in Drawanko, and nothing that Feline had said seemed to stand out to him. He clearly wanted to pinpoint what exactly had gotten her protection, but before he could question her any further, Roderick reappeared. I am done, Lady Rosamund, he said. There was a smile on his face, but his eyes were wandering in a way that was somewhat suspicious. He didn't attempt to engage in the conversation about Feline's new element like before. In fact, he was actually looked to be inching away from us. Roderick, did something happen, I asked. You didn't fail the ritual, did you? All eyes fell on him, at which point he frantically shook his head. No, it was a success. He then looked at us all, seemingly even more troubled than before. In fact, it was too much of a success. For some reason, I got protection from every element. From every element, I repeated, moderately surprised. Wow, that really is something. Good work, Roderick. You obtained all elements through the divine protection of the subordinate gods, Gundalf explained. He sounded a little more shocked than I, which was probably to be expected considering that he actually had common sense. To think that such a thing was even possible. Is that rare, I asked? This is my first time hearing of someone becoming an omni-elemental through the ritual to receive divine protections. Roderick obtaining new elements hadn't sounded that strange to me, especially when Feline had gotten one just a moment before. But someone becoming an omni-elemental like that was, as it turned out, simply impossible. But why? Gundalf mumbled. What must one do to make this happen? He looked straight at Roderick, who then fumbled his way through an answer. I personally have no idea. I just channeled Mana into the circle and, all the elemental symbols began to shine. It was as though I were omni-elemental to begin with. Roderick had possessed earth and wind since his baptism ceremony, and the pillars of light that had shot up from those that had reached the highest, while the lights in the other elements had only stood half as tall. He was omni-elemental, but it seemed that his new affinities weren't particularly strong. And this was not the case at your baptism, Gundalf asked. No, sir, I was told that I only had affinities for wind and earth. Has anything of significance changed since then? I do not know. There must be something. I cannot see why someone with 2 elements would become omni-elemental otherwise. It really is nonsensical that I, of all people, obtained these elements, but I truly do not know why it happened, Roderick said, lowering his eyes in the face of Gundalf's continued intensity. I shook my head. Roderick, you should not disparage yourself. It is disrespectful to the gods who gave you their protection. I then turned my attention to Gundalf, resolved to keep him from troubling Roderick any further, as was my duty as his lady. Obtaining the protection of every element is something to be celebrated, is it not? Perhaps you should be congratulating rather than interrogating Roderick. I understand your interest in such a rare occurrence, but your current approach will not produce any results. Please leave your questioning at that for today. I suppose you are correct, Lady Rosamund, Gundalf said, letting out a sigh and allowing his shoulders to relax. He then congratulated Roderick and Feline on their new elements. Furthermore, I continued, while this is a rare event, these protections only make one's mana easier to use. They do not change one's life in any meaningful way, and they may be taken away if one grows complacent or arrogant. Roderick, Feline, consider this a sign that your efforts have been recognized. Now, shall we return to the dormitory to study for tomorrow's written lessons? Yes, Lady Rosamund, Roderick said, nodding with a brighter expression than before. But just as I was beginning to think we had wrapped things up nicely, Herschel returned from cleansing the farthest hall and fixing me with a glare. Lady Rosamund would not like for something this extraordinary to be passed over so easily. Is that so, Professor Herschel? Although this does warrant celebration, it is also potentially disastrous. If news spreads that a student with only 2 elements became omni-elemental through divine protections, then the Royal Academy would be thrown into some degree of chaos. As such, everyone keep this to yourselves. Judging by the excitement we had seen from Gundalf and the students who hadn't received more protections than they had elements, I could absolutely see Roderick becoming an omni-elemental causing a panic. Thankfully, we're all from the Ehrenfest, so it was just a matter of swearing an oath of a vow of secrecy. We should carry out our own research on obtaining new elements, and as we still wish to hear more about what happened, I will join you for dinner tomorrow. Understood. It's kind of annoying that we can't just say, you got more elements? Awesome! And leave it at that. Even after returning to the dormitory, we needed to stay quiet about Roderick getting new elements, much to his disappointment. He looked especially frustrated over dinner, when everyone was exuberantly discussing Wulfric getting the divine protections of multiple subordinates and Feline receiving a new element. I could tell that he was dying to brag as well. The next day, everyone passed their written lessons for the shared courses, then I started preparing for music class in the afternoon. Rosina was helping me since I expected the music professors to request another new song, and even if they weren't, it did seem like a good idea to have one in reserve. Now, this is the song that you must play this year, the professor said once we had all arrived at class. Once again, we were being asked to play a song chosen for us and a song of our choice. I looked at the former and slowly exhaled. This is nostalgic. I first played that song almost 2 years ago. Though, wait. How high of a bar did Ferdinand set for me? He kept making me practice with Rosina, and not once did he praise me or say that I could stop. Do both of my music teachers have hearts of stone, perhaps? I started to practice, and it was then that I heard an Ernsbach and Archnoble began to play a familiar tune. I hadn't realized it right away due to how it was arranged, but it was a song I had given to Ferdinand. That was a love song for Geduld, I think. It must have become popular in Ernsbach after Ferdinand's winter debut. I got no doubts that a ton of people asked him to play a new song, and given that he wouldn't really have been able to turn down such a request in Ernsbach, he probably ended up playing it over and over again. I strained my ears trying to focus on the arrangement, only to have the Ernsbach Archnoble playing it shoot me something of a victorious smile. This is a new Ernsbach song composed by Lord Ferdinand, she said. It does not belong to you nor to Ehrenfest, Lady Rosamund. I composed it. Ferdinand just arranged it, but okay, whatever. I decided to hold my tongue. Ferdinand was surely doing everything in his power to secure more allies, and there was no reason for me to interfere with that. I am truly fond of the songs that Lord Ferdinand composes, I said. If you are playing one, then I would very much love to hear it. It can only be heard in Ernsbach otherwise, no? I am still practicing it, but if that will do. The girl sighed, evidently relieved that I had accepted the song as Aaron's box, and readied her harpsichord and started to sing. This isn't a love song. It's a wistful piece about one's hometown. It was a song about one's Geduld following her departure after the sweet moons of winter. I could see why it would be misinterpreted as romantic, and those who sang it in Ahrensbach no doubt assumed that Ferdinand was singing about his fiancée, who had returned to the Royal Academy, but after hearing his parting words and promise, I understood it was a song of nostalgia. Though I guess he wouldn't want me to point this out, right? I could already imagine that Linde running to Ferdinand in tears and screaming, "You deceived me!" Of course, Ferdinand would then give a cool response like, "You only deceived yourself." It wasn't a situation where he could come out on top, though. I wanted Linde to be as pleased as possible so that she would treat Ferdinand as well as possible in turn. At the very least, I needed to keep quiet until after the star-binding ceremony, once he's been officially married into Ahrensbach. Ferdinand was an outsider from a bottom-ranking middle duchy, and as long as his marriage had yet to take place, the treatment he received was entirely up to Detlinde, Georgine, and so on. I wanted to do all that I could to make his stay as comfortable as possible. The moment I steeled my resolve, however, Wilfried joined me to listening to the song. He seemed to recognize the hook, and his expression quickly became one of confusion. Uncle may have played this song first, but Brother... No. Wilfried, shut up! Shut up! I cut Wilfried off with a firm thump on the shoulder and a broad smile, my silent cry for him to shut up, shut up, shut up! Appeared to have gotten through to him as he responded with a quiet nod. Soon enough, the Ahrensbach girl finished her performance. I am so glad to have had this opportunity to hear a song by Ferdinand, I said. Please do tell Ferdinand that he has composed yet another wonderful piece. Furthermore, should Ferdinand make any more new songs, I would love to hear them as well. I gave the girl my thanks, repeating Ferdinand as many times and as clearly as I was able. My aim was to make it apparent to everyone that he had made the song, although it made me feel very much like a sports announcer. Hands together for Ferdinand, ladies and gentlemen. That was his work, through and through. Let's all ensure his days are spent peacefully. I wanted to go around shilling him to every Ahrensbach noble, though I also understood that he wouldn't much appreciate it. As I was lost in my thoughts, the Ahrensbach girl gave me a mischievous smile. Lady Rosamond, will you not be playing any new songs this year? You are able to make them without your instructor, Lord Ferdinand, aren't you? I am ever so eager to hear what you have written. Her taunting left me no choice. I needed to show everyone that Ehrenfest could do just fine, even without Ferdinand. Plus, I need to pass all my classes the first time around, Ferdinand. I can see exactly why people call you the Lord of Evil. I am honored that you look forward to my songs so much, I said with a smile. I will gladly use this opportunity to play one that I composed myself. With that, I went over to the professor and asked to be graded. I took my seat, readied my harpsichord, took in a slow breath, then began to play. This year's assigned piece was technically a love song, one that students our age apparently needed to know for when we went around searching for an escort. That had nothing to do with me, though, as I was already engaged. I played the song without incident, having already learned it 2 years ago, then moved on to the song of my own choice. It was a piece dedicated to Shutsaria, the goddess of wind, a wish to protect those dear to the singer's heart. In my case, those special people were Ferdinand, who had gone to Ahrensbach, and the children who were losing their families in the purge. As I sang and played the harpsichord, I started to feel my mana slipping through my fingers. Oh shit! And next thing I knew, it was overflowing and shining as it turned into a blessing. It was yellow, the divine color of Shutsaria. Surprised to be experiencing a repeat of my debut, I tried to stop the flow of my mana, but what? It won't stop! For some reason, the flow of my mana wasn't listening to me. I started to panic, but I couldn't risk failing in my classes, so I continued to play nonetheless. The blessing didn't stop until the very end of the song. There were two key factors that stood out to me here. I hadn't been able to stop my mana, much like before, and nowhere near as much had seemed to be expended. Wait, could this be because of my ritual yesterday? Everyone was watching me in a daze, our professor included. I wanted nothing more than for the earth to swallow me whole. Lady Rosamond, our professor said, "What in the world was that?" That was, the goddess of wind's blessing, I replied. It seemed that yesterday's ritual made it a little easier for my blessings to overflow. Of course, my half-hearted chuckle wasn't enough to smooth things over. This wasn't good. I would need to figure out how to control my mana all over again, else I ran the risk of sending out even more blessings than before. It hadn't even occurred to me that the ritual might have such an effect. I despaired, conscious that I didn't even have a guardian to help me. What should I do in a time like this, Ferdinand? After passing music class, I sent Riarda and Erdonans asking her to come fetch me, then fled back to the dormitory. Riarda, what can I do? I cried. I want to be able to control my mana like before, but I just can't anymore. I think the Divine Protection Ritual is to blame. I'm truly sorry, but I know of no solution to this problem, Riordan replied, wearing a thoroughly troubled expression. In my generation, we did not obtain our staffs until after performing that ritual. Isn't it there had actually been a reason why the students of past generations had needed to wait until their graduations to get their staffs? I cradled my head, having no idea how to properly control the flow of my mana to stop my blessings. Those in Lord Ferdinand's generation obtained their staffs in their 3rd year, Riordan continued, but again, this occurred after the Divine Protections ritual. That would not have experienced any significant changes in their Divine Protections or mana efficiency after obtaining their staffs. In other words, not even Ferdinand would be able to advise me in this situation. The very thought made me teary-eyed. Who arbitrarily decided that we would obtain our staffs first? Take me back to the old way of doing things. Professor Herscher is going to be here tonight, so perhaps you could consult her, Riordan suggested. I'll do just that. Yeah, good luck. Well, that's not good. Discussing Divine Protections with Herscher. Come dinner time, Herscher arrived at the dormitory. She appeared to have a headache, but she wasn't the only one. Professor, the ritual yesterday has made my mana so much harder to control, I said. I don't feel any being spent when I use it, and I couldn't stop myself from giving a blessing during music class. What should I do? I obviously do not have an answer. Blessings cause no harm to anyone, so perhaps you can simply allow them to happen? If you wish for any further advice, consult Ferdinand. Herscher evidently had zero interest in working through problems centered around having too much mana. Lord Wolfried, might we speak after dinner, she said, swiftly moving the conversation along. Of course, he replied. I will have my attendants prepare a room so that anything we discuss remains confidential. We can move there after eating. Eating with one's supervisor was a completely normal occurrence in other duchies, but here in the Ehrenfest dormitory it was exceptionally rare. The students all eyed Herscher, wondering what had happened to warrant her appearance. Herscher didn't even touch on what the 3rd years had done during the Divine Protection ritual. Instead, she praised everyone for passing a 2nd day of classes on the first go. Ehrenfest truly is spectacular when it comes to written lessons, she said. Once again, everyone has passed on the first day. Your grades are rising by the year, and the professors are rather impressed. Now that more people were learning the mana compression method, our practical grades were steadily rising too. Herscher continued, I thought that Ehrenfest would start doing far worse in practical lessons once Angelica, Cornelius, and Hartmut graduated, but Lenore, Matthias, and Lorenz are all showing continual improvement, and the 3 Archduke candidates are all scoring excellently. I look forward to another successful year. We students have reached a point where we no longer saw our grades as accomplishments. We would pass one of our classes and then immediately move on to the next. That was why third-party praise was so important. Hearing that the professors were seeing Ehrenfest in the better light, and that our duchy was improving as a whole meant a lot. It is because Ferdinand demands so much, I said. I was once again tasked with ensuring that we pass all our classes on the first day. Not to mention there were many students who risked growing mentally unstable without a goal to focus on. We hadn't received any more news about the purge, but we still didn't intend to reveal the situation to Herscher anytime soon. Herscher was positively delighted with the food she was served, although the rest of us were entirely used to it by now. We were gradually selling more and more recipes during the yearly Archduke Conference, but no other duchies had produced their own spins on them just yet. Such was to be expected. Recreating the meals as per the recipe was already challenging enough. It was several years before even my own chef started to create any new dishes instead of sticking to pre-existing recipes, I said. I expect it will only be a matter of time, though. I was most interested in seeing how faithfully other duchies would follow the steps that went against the common sense of this world, like with making broth and such. Each duchy would then need to begin the trial and error process of adding local ingredients and sampling the results to see what best suited its people's tastes. And in the meantime, we needed to make new variations ourselves. Lady Rosamond, what dessert is this? Herscher asked. A sweet known as mousse in Ehrenfest, I replied. It was a high-effort dish composed of yogurt mousse sandwiched between 2 slices of sponge cake. Incidentally, we were giving away the recipe for this very dessert as my reward this year. We were free to start spreading it since the Opera Company had now begun to make gelatin. I'll do my best to make gelatin popular, especially since Frida's working so hard in the Italian restaurant. Frida may have been giving me gelatin so that I can introduce other nobles to its many wonders, but this wasn't a bribe either. Rather, I just wanted more tasty food to be popular. I already knew from experience that jiggly desserts like jelly and caramel custard weren't very well received, which was why I was planning to combine the mousse with last year's award and create fallal mousse tarts. I wanted to see how the sovereign nobles would respond to this dessert, which is why we had specially prepared some to be served. The plan was to bring some to small tea parties of royals, but not to any large gatherings. The chefs still struggled to make sponge cake, and there were still occasions where their efforts ended in failure. I thought the mouthfeel might seem unusual, so I flavored it with honey and yogurt to make it taste a bit more familiar. How is it? I asked. The sour taste of the yogurt eased the sweetness of the honey mousse, and since the mousse was between two pieces of sponge cake, I was sure that the texture wouldn't be too off-putting. The texture certainly is unique, Harsha replied. It really does melt in the mouth, and I must say it is quite delicious. Would it be safe to serve to the royal family? You would do well to make it look a little fancier, but the flavor will suffice. Having received the go-ahead from Harsha, I decided to think about how to make the dessert look better. Decorating it with Fullmetal or Rutreb jam would allow us to mix in red and white, very fitting for a winter sweet. After dessert, which had doubled as a test run for our future tea parties, we moved elsewhere with Harsha. We Archduke candidates had a duty to be present for the discussion that was about to follow, so we had to report back to the Archduke. Also joining us were Feline and Roderick, whose acquisitions of new elements had pretty much necessitated this meeting in the first place. 6 seats were prepared, and once the attendants had served us our tea, Harsha motioned for them and the guard knights to step back. I shan't go as far as to clear the room, but we will be using a sound-blocking magic tool, she said. Lady Rosamund, activate this one if you would. What? Me? I could only blink in surprise as Harsha handed me an area of effect version of the tool in question. Under normal circumstances, the ones to activate it would have been on her, considering that she had brought it. You have so much mana that merely playing a song in class caused you to release a blessing. That could not have happened if you had so little mana that you were on the verge of death. She had a point, so I channeled mana into the sound-blocking tool and then set it down as instructed. It consumed much less mana than expected. In fact, it barely seemed to consume any at all. This is so similar to after my first Areve, when I ended up losing fine control of my mana. Maybe it actually would have been best for me to return for the dedication ritual this year. I could have used that opportunity to expend some of my mana and helped in the fight against the Lord of Winter. I sighed and returned to my seat, at which point Harsha looked over us all. Now then, let us begin by sharing what we know, she said. Lady Charlotte is here, though she did not participate in the rituals to acquire one's divine protections. Furthermore, while I am aware that you have spoken with Gundalf about the incident, I was by the shrine and this could not hear your conversation. Harsha went on to tell Charlotte what had occurred yesterday, though I noticed that she didn't mention my ritual. Feline's and Roderick's circumstances were already considered unusual, so I was sure that mine would be absolutely bizarre. I glanced at Harsha, but it seemed that she wasn't going to mention my ritual at all. Gundalf spoke with you after Feline returned to the auditorium with more elements, Harsha said. Tell me, what did you discuss? We collectively started to recount the conversation, working together to fill in the gaps in one another's memories. Once we were done, Charlotte tilted her head at us in confusion. The purpose of the ritual is to obtain divine protection from the gods, correct? I struggled to see why receiving the protection of various subordinates is so surprising. We were completely on the same wavelength. Aside from Roderick being omni-elemental, none of what had happened seemed to be that odd to me. Harsha sighed. Allow me to explain what things are like for a normal noble. That is, not a student from Dunkelfelger or an apprentice knight expected to earn protections from the fighting-centric subordinates. They will obtain the protections of the primary god of whatever elements they have, and nothing more. Unless there is some dormitory supervisor purposely holding their tongue, no students have attained the divine protection of subordinates not involved in warfare for over a decade. Everyone had, of course, been calling what happened a rare occurrence, but only now did it occur to me just how rare it was. We could only blink at each other and exchange glances as Harsha continued. In the past, the majority of those who received the divine protection of multiple subordinates was the Archduke candidates or members of the royal family. It was extremely rare for lay nobles and men nobles to receive any at all. In fact, one has to go back 100 years or more to find any such examples. So in short, Feline and Roderick are both extraordinary, I concluded. Harsha fixed me with a stern glare. I am asking that you understand the abnormality of this situation, Lady Rosamund. I nodded in response. Although the reason for these events was still very much beyond me, I recognized that they were a bit weird. I also understood that there was a dormitory supervisor purposely holding their tongue right in front of me. Apprentice knights and students from Dunkelfelger often receive divine protections from the fighting-type subordinates, but we do not know why this is the case, Harsha went on. Anyone else receiving the protections of subordinates is exceptionally rare, though not entirely unprecedented. It is for this reason that Lord Wilfrid received a few words of surprise and admiration, but nothing more. That much made sense. Harsha even noted that Hannelore had received a similar reaction. Feline, however, is another matter entirely. She is a lay noble that did not have an affinity for wind, but did not receive Shadaria's protection, and obtained a new element solely from the divine protection of the goddess of wisdom. One would struggle to find a similar case in recent history, and that is to say nothing of the now omni-elemental Roderick. Felina Roderick's expressions clouded. They had just been so happy to receive more elements. I couldn't imagine that they expected this to become such a major incident. Professor Herscher, what about me? I asked, conscious that I had received the divine protection of so many more subordinates, and even caused the statues to move. I still didn't know how rare that was. Herscher merely waved away my question. That is not the first time you have done something incomprehensibly bizarre, and it surely will not be the last. Your circumstances are not worth discussing. Yes, they are, Wilfred suddenly cried out. We can't ignore her when she's the most likely to cause problems. He sounded kind of desperate, since he was always flung around the most when I did something strange at the Royal Academy. Again, Herscher responded with a dismissive wave, this time offering the plain smile of someone who had completely given up. Our best option is to consult Ferdinand and have the monsters solve things between themselves. He's very likely to understand Lady Rosemine's situation than anyone else. And dealing with her is outside of my scope in the first place. But you're Ehrenfest's dormitory supervisor, I exclaimed. Don't say I'm out of your scope, at least try to help. I refuse, Herscher said, broadening her smile. My time with Ferdinand taught me that attempting to help with those matters only makes me look like a fool. To honor his request for my aid, Lady Rosamine, I will assist you in concealing matters such as this and throw you a bone in class, but you will need to solve the actual problems on your own. So, Ferdinand is the reason that Professor Herscher's abandoning me. He's so mean! Despite my continued wails, Herscher pushed us onward. That said, while Lady Rosamine is not my problem, we have known her to be bizarre from the very beginning. The fact that she has begun to influence those around her is very much is. Her gaze shifted to Felina Roderick. Yesterday, 8 Ehrenfest students performed the Divine Protection Ritual. 4 passed without incident, acquiring as many protections as they have elements. The 4 of you, in contrast, have some very unusual results. Do you not see the unifying factor here? I racked my brain trying to figure out what she meant. We weren't all the same status or genders. What then did we have in common? I don't know, Wilfred eventually said. Is there anything that connects us other than the fact that we are all from Ehrenfest? Sitting before me are Lady Rosamine, her fiancé, and her retainers, Herscher said. She is your unifying factor. Wilfred clapped his hands together and shouted, Of course, you're completely right. He looked as satisfied as someone who had just received the answer to an especially tricky puzzle. I'd rather you not suddenly blame all this on me, I declared, overwhelmed with the urge to deny absolutely everything. But nobody supported my righteous fury. Even Feline and Charlotte appeared to have been convinced by Herscher's awful and completely unfounded theory. That's right, theory. Anytime that something unexpected occurs in Ehrenfest, one can generally assume that Lady Rosamine is responsible. Thus, I have the utmost confidence here. I groaned, unable to protest. Herscher gave me a serious look. I believe that for you all to have obtained so many divine protections, you must be doing something that either other nobles are not. Do you have any idea what that might be? Well, yes, I replied. You do, Wilfred exclaimed. He and everyone else were suddenly leaned forward, their eyes wide. Huh? Shouldn't it be obvious to everyone but Charlotte? I mentioned it while we were in the auditorium. To be honest, I don't understand why neither you nor Professor Gundolf can figure it out yourselves. It's outright written in the textbooks. Do elaborate, Herscher prompted, now leaning even closer. I reflexively leaned away from her and said, It's prayer. As the High Bishop, I pray and offer my mana to the gods on a daily basis. And as my retainers, Felina Roderick regularly visit the temple and similarly offer their prayers. Hartman and my other retainers have also started donating their mana even without meaning to, as they have been touching the divine instruments in an attempt to learn how to make them. Ferdinand had said that it required too much mana to be useful in a fight, but Hartman and Cornelius could now make Abeglave's sword. Daniel didn't even have enough mana to maintain a shape, but which had made him rather depressed. I see that Ehrenfest Temple has changed greatly in my absence, Herscher said. That is nothing like how I remember it. I've been putting a lot of work into it, I replied, puffing out my chest. Wilfred and Charlotte have similarly been traveling around throughout the Central District, performing ceremonies for Spring Prayer and the Harvest Festival, which of course involves praying. Not to mention, in Ehrenfest, Archduke candidates pray to the gods when supplying mana to the Foundation. Is that not commonplace? I suppose he did say something like that. It's written in both our textbooks and the Bible that praying to the gods is important for earning divine protections. In my opinion, if the nobles of other duchies revile the temple and refuse to pray sincerely, then it is only natural that they would not receive many. Angelica had failed to receive divine protections from her primary god after failing to remember their name, and with this in mind, it seemed only natural that those who did not pray sincerely would be given only the bare minimum. I see we were mistaken in our understanding of the text, Herschel said with a tired sigh. The instructions to pray to the gods are not just referring to the ritual itself, they are a custom that we need to adopt into our daily lives. Indeed, the gods who granted me their divine protection were those to whom I already prayed, I said, placing a hand on my cheek. Perhaps this theory would receive more weight if we were to ask Lady Handler whether she prays often to Dragoner, and Angrif, or Dunkelfelger students in the apprentice nights, whether they usually pray before battle. I shall consult those from Dunkelfelger as they consistently obtain multiple divine protections, Herschel said, then her face stiffened. This explains what happened with Lord Wilfrid, and also with Feline, who has performed intellectual pursuits in the House of the Gods, and frequently prayed for Mr. North's protection. However, it does not explain Roderick becoming omni-elemental. Do you have any theories? I have one, Roderick said. His fists were clenched and his eyes downcast. However, I cannot tell whether I am allowed to say it. I will need to consult the Abbot before I can answer. And the fact that you did not consult him yesterday means he is busy, I assume, Herschel said, looking from me to Wilfrid to Charlotte. Indeed, Sylvester was no doubt running himself ragged, dealing with the purge and the decided punishments, especially now that Ferdinand, his right-hand man, was gone. Every Abbot is busy during winter socializing, I said. Well, when he has a little more time, I should very much like to speak with him, Herschel replied. I always got the impression that she was avoiding the Archduke, so hearing that surprised me. What do you want to talk to him about? I asked. Herschel didn't respond. Instead, she turned to Wilfrid. Tell me, what happens when one obtains divine protection? Magic requires less mana, and spells of that element become easier to cast. Correct. Now then, Feline, what happens when you have more usable mana? You can cast larger spells, or alternatively use spells for longer. Correct, Herschel replied, then looked at me. Lady Rosamond, you have introduced a new mana compression method, which is very clearly tied to half our dormitory students, increasing their mana capacities more efficiently than the students of other duchies. And now this year, we have perhaps discovered how one can secure more divine protections. If what you say is true, then Ehrenfest students, and Ehrenfest students alone, can expect to earn multiple protections going forward. Mana compression increased one's capacity, while divine protections increased one's efficiency. If we handle this well, then we would be able to perform several times more magic than before. This is going to be revolutionary. Rediscovery for Jürgensmith. I suggest that Ehrenfest present these findings during the energy tournament as its research for this year. Is it not common practice to hide methods that can improve one's mana and the like, I asked? It is, and under normal circumstances, I would recommend just that. However, there was a sudden glint in her purple eyes. Do you know how the other duchies view Ehrenfest right now? We detailed everything that we had learned from the reports of the Archduke Conference. I see the Abbot is not one to shy away from inconvenient truths, Herschel muttered. To be frank, there are few who see Ehrenfest positively. We suffered very little in the Civil War due to remaining neutral. We are introducing one trend after another, and we are now biting into the territory of top-ranking duchies. On top of all that, there are many terrible rumors surrounding Ob Ehrenfest. Of course, this distaste has only become more drastic as our grades have risen. As it turned out, the state of affairs was even harsher than the Archduke Conference had revealed. Herschel continued, if we were to monopolize not just mana, but divine protections as well, then those in the sovereignty, where the mana shortage was being felt all too keenly, would not be pleased. Do you grasp my meaning? We are in a position where the ideal course of action is to publicize our findings and ease the frustrations of others. Are we not? Our knowledge will be perceived as a gift to sovereignty. This certainly is something for the Ob to decide, I said. Precisely, and you will do well to discuss it thoroughly, Herschel said, then heaved a sigh. Lady Rosamond, you are attracting much attention as Ferdinand's disciple. It seemed that in the sovereignty most thought that Ferdinand was secretly pulling the strings of my sainthood. Even now that he was gone, they were very interested in finding out whether he had left me any valuable information. There are many eager to find out what you know, Herschel continued, but you do not particularly participate in socializing. Thus you are still something of a mystery. I am summoned often and questioned to no end, in particular about your relationship with Ferdinand. Everyone present swallowed. Lady Eglantine has been elected as the new instructor of the Archduke Candidate course for one reason above all others. Because she is closer to you than any other member of the royal family. Really? Now that she is married to Prince Anastasius, she is no longer of the Klassenberg Archducal family. She is a member of royalty. I would advise that you take great care around her. She will not be able to refuse any orders from the king that are said to be for the sake of the country. I intend to aid you in hiding various matters, but I cannot help to solve any issues once they have occurred. Set on being as disengaged from these matters as possible. I immediately understood why the ever-doubtful Ferdinand placed so much trust in her. I suppose you should avoid the library as well. The new librarian, Hortensia, is the first wife of the sovereign knight commander. So Robert's wife. He seems to harbor suspicions in regards to you and Ferdinand. Robert, the Sovereign Knight Commander, had called Ferdinand a seed of Adalgisa. I envisioned the man's sharp eyes glaring at me from behind Hortensia's soft smile and instinctively clenched my fists. Okay. Let's see. I'm assuming that what Roderick was talking about was becoming name-sworn. That's the only thing I could think of. Anyway, I'll get to work on everything, and I'll see you guys in the next one.